Okay, now we're going to take what we learned about 2D shapes, polygons, finding their areas, and use that to look at three-dimensional figures, find their surface areas and volume. So first thing there, so these are just the notes that you're going to have and follow along with. Certain times I'll ask you to pause and think about certain questions, so make sure you do that. You get more out of this. So a solid is a three-dimensional figure that is bounded by curved or flat surfaces. So any 3D shape we could call a solid. A special type of solid is a polyhedron. Notice the word poly, the prefix poly there. So that's a solid that's bounded by polygons. So not every solid is a polyhedron, and we'll study polyhedron that we'll study polyhedron and also solids that aren't polyhedron, like spheres wouldn't be a polyhedron because a sphere isn't made up of polygons. But if you look down here, that would be an example of a polyhedron. All right, in a polyhedron, the faces are the polygons. So those are like the faces, the sides of the 3D figure. The edges, those are line segments. So they're going to have length, and we're going to use that to find surface area. And then where the edges meet, they're going to meet at the vertex, and those are points. Okay, so first we want to talk about how to classify polygons, solids, and we'll fill in the blanks on the bottom, but first you have to determine whether it's a pyramid or a prism. A prism has two bases, and a pyramid has one base. That's the way to distinguish between the two. And then you name it by its base. If it's not a polyhedron, meaning it's not made up of all polygons, like this cylinder over here, or this cone, or this sphere, then they have special names. So let's start from the top. So this is a prism because it has two bases. Either like these two sides could be the bases, the top and the bottom could be the bases, or the front and the back could be the bases. That's not always the case, but with a rectangular prism it is, because all 6 sides are rectangles. So we're going to call this a rectangular prism. So it's a prism because it has two bases that are parallel to each other, and they're rectangles. Now, in this example, it's kind of like a prism. It has two bases, but those bases aren't polygons, they're circles. So when that's the case, it's just called a cylinder. Alright, and it's called a right cylinder because the bases are, if you draw a line from one circle to the other, they're like perpendicular to each other. You could have cylinders that aren't right, that look like this, and we'll talk about them when they come up. Okay, the next one to the right of that is just a cone. More specifically, a right cone, but because if you go right down from the vertex, it's perpendicular to the base. So when it's like a pyramid but has just a circle as a base, it's called a cone. And this on the bottom left looks like a ball, basketball type shape. That's called a sphere. Alright, we'll spend the whole section on those, but those aren't polyhedron because they're not made of polygons. And then on the bottom right here we have a pyramid. Pyramids and prisms, you always got to indicate them by their base. So this looks like it's a square base, so we're going to call it a square pyramid. And notice how in a pyramid, the sides, the faces that aren't the base are triangles, whereas in a rectangle, the faces that aren't the bases are rectangles. So that's a big difference between prisms. Prisms have rectangles that aren't the bases. Squares have triangles that aren't the bases. Pyramid, all those triangles meet at one point.